2 out of 3 people with sciatica don't understand what's causing it. In this video, I'm going to show you the most common cause of sciatica, what you can do to get immediate relief, and what not to do, including stretching, which can actually keep you in a cycle of pain. When my client Valerie contacted me, she was desperate. She'd been suffering for months with low back pain that had now developed into severe sciatica after having her spine manipulated by a local osteopath. She couldn't walk, sit down, or even lie down without being in pain, which she put at a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10. She'd been relying on painkillers, but even they were having no effect by the time we spoke on our first call via Zoom. I was over 5,000 kilometres away, and in her eyes, the last chance she had to find a solution to her pain. Before I get into what happened, let's clear up what sciatica actually is, because people use that word to describe all sorts of pain that travels down the leg, and not all of it is really sciatica. True sciatica is radicular pain, which occurs when the nerve in the lumbar spine gets compressed or inflamed. These are typically the L5 or the S1 nerve roots. It usually presents as a stabbing, electrical or shooting pain that travels in a narrow band down the path of the sciatic nerve into the glute, the back or side of the thigh, sometimes into the calf or even into the foot. That's different from what is known as somatic referred pain. Sometimes pain spreads into the glute, the thigh or even the calf, not because the sciatic nerve is irritated, but because parts of the back and the leg share some of the same nerves in the spinal cord. So the brain can basically get the signal location wrong. You feel pain in the leg, but the leg itself isn't the source of the pain. It's the back that shares the same wiring. That kind of pain is harder to pinpoint and usually feels more dull, achy or diffuse. So pain going down the back of the leg doesn't necessarily mean it's sciatica. It can be somatic referred pain. And then there's radiculopathy, which is different again. Radiculopathy is when the nerve root isn't just irritated and painful, it's actually starting to lose function. If the sensory fibres are affected, you may notice numbness or tingling. And if the motor fibres are affected, you might notice weakness. An example of this is foot drop. So when the muscles that dorsiflex the foot have their power cut off by severe compression of the L5 nerve root, causing the foot to drop when you walk. And that brings me to an important safety point, because there are certain red flags to watch out for. If you have progressive weakness, saddle numbness, or changes in your bowel or bladder function, these are signs of Cauda equina syndrome, which is a medical emergency. So you shouldn't try to fix this on your own. You need to seek urgent medical assessment. Now, let's talk about the most common cause of sciatica. Research shows that in roughly 90% of cases, sciatica is a result of a lumbar disc herniation compressing a spinal nerve root. It can also be chemical irritation of the nerve root that causes an inflammatory response. But we're going to focus on physical compression here, as this is the most common cause. This was the main issue with my client Valerie. She already had a confirmed disc herniation at L5-S1 in her lumbar spine, and the osteopathic intervention she received increased this to the point where it compressed both her L5 and S1 nerve roots, creating those shooting pains down her leg, all the way into her foot. So let me show you the anatomy behind that. This is a model of the sacrum at the base of the spine and the 2 lower lumbar vertebrae. So we're L4 and L5. Then you've got the intervertebral discs sitting between the vertebrae. So the disc between L4 and L5 is known as L4, L5. And the disc between L5 and the sacrum is known as L5, S1. The discs have a tough outer annulus made of collagen fibres and a gel-like nucleus on the inside. So what often happens over time is that repeated poor movement patterns stress the discs and its layer of collagen, which can start to weaken and delaminate, allowing the nucleus of the disc to bulge out or herniate. So if I apply, let's have a look. If I apply compression and flexion, you can see how that disc bulges out. okay? It actually extrudes, meaning it breaks through the outer wall of the discs and then comes into contact with one of the nerve roots. So when that happens, the nerve root gets compressed or inflamed, causing those classic sharp shooting pains down the leg. So how do we get instant relief from this? We find what I call a position of respite that reduces stress on the affected disc and as a result reduces irritation of the affected nerve root, which in turn reduces your sciatic symptoms. So the best position of respite is different for different people, which is why I'm going to show you a few variations. You're going to have to experiment a little bit to find the best position for you. So let me show you all the options before trying any so you can see what you think will work. So the first option is lying face down on the floor. You'll need to keep a cushion or a rolled up towel to hand when we try option 2. While you get down to the floor, try to keep your spine in a neutral position, avoiding flexion. You can brace your abs, reverse lunge, hinge at the hips, keeping your spine in neutral so as not to stress your lumbar spine. I prefer doing this on the floor over a soft bed because it gives you firmer support. First of all, try lying with your forehead on your hands. Take slow, deep breaths, feeling your lumbar spine sink down on the exhale. You can also reduce tension on your spinal cord by adjusting your head position. Placing one fist under your chin, then you can try 2 fists. Pick the position most comfortable for you and continue to take deep breaths. Now, this can actually increase your pain if you're intolerant of lumbar extension. If that's the case with you, you can try this second variation. So take the rolled up towel you prepared, place it underneath the ACIS, which are the bony protrusions at the front of your pelvis, and lie back down. This prevents your lumbar spine falling into too much extension and applies a gentle compression to it, taking the stress off the discs. I've seen this small adjustment make a massive difference with some clients, bringing their pain down very quickly when they haven't previously been able to find a position of respite lying down. Again, take some deep breaths and let gravity assist you by gradually helping the bulging disc reabsorb slightly. You may need to experiment with the thickness of the towel or use some cushions and keep the position that clearly reduces your symptoms. You may need to adjust your position slightly depending on the location of your disc bulge. In the case of Valerie, who had right-sided symptoms, we found that the most effective position for her was lying on her left side over some cushions that ease pressure on the right side of her disc bulge, reducing the pain in her leg from a 9 out of 10 to 2 out of 10 in less than 30 seconds. So that allowed her to get the best night's sleep she'd had in weeks. After you've spent about 5 or 10 minutes in the position that most reduces your symptoms, you can get back up from the floor doing the same thing you did to get down, but in reverse. Then the next intervention you can try is nerve flossing. If you're in the midst of an acute episode of sciatica, then this is probably not the best option for you. But if your symptoms have settled and you're still sensing some tension in the nerve, then it's worth trying. For some people, this will help get your nerves moving again and reduce the painful friction that can build up if your nerves have become adhered due to lack of motion and or inflammation. For others, this can cause a flare-up. So proceed with care and don't force it. To be clear, we're not stretching the nerve here. There's a neurodynamic test called the slump test that deliberately tensions the sciatic nerve and its nerve roots to see if they're sensitized. This is performed like this, where we add tension to the spinal cord by slumping and flexing the neck. Then add tension to the sciatic nerve by straightening the leg. If your lumbar nerve roots are mechanically sensitive or irritated, this will provoke your sciatic symptoms because we're adding tension to the nervous system from both ends. This is not what we're trying to do when we floss your sciatic nerve. When we floss the nerve, we add tension from one end while we slacken from the other, which encourages movement of the nerves. So you need to sit on a surface where your feet hang down without touching the floor. Then position your lumbar spine in a neutral position to reduce tension on the spinal cord. Then, when you straighten your leg, you look up, extending your neck. So we're adding tension via the leg and slackening via the neck. Then vice versa. You flex your neck and flex your leg at the same time, adding tension in the neck while slackening in the leg. It's important to synchronize these two movements so that we're gliding the sciatic nerve along its tract, not tensioning it. Sensitive nerves don't like to be cranked on. All we're doing is trying to free up the nerve to help its movement. And that brings us to the next biggest mistake people make. They try to stretch their pain away. I had another client, Najma, who had low back pain and had been religiously doing hamstring stretches for 4 years. This was keeping her in a cycle of pain, but she kept stretching because her doctor and physios told her that's what she should do. She started to believe that there was something wrong with her because despite following medical advice, she was still in pain. Nobody had explained to her that every time she was stretching what she thought were tight hamstrings, she was actually cranking on her sciatic nerve and keeping it irritated. There's one important anatomical detail that most people don't realise. Your hamstrings attach at one end to the bottom of the pelvis, and at the other they insert on the tibia and the fibula, the two bones in your lower leg. So they cross your hip and your knee, but not your ankle. That means that when you're doing one of those hamstring stretches, when you pull your toes towards you, the extra tension you feel in the back of your leg isn't your hamstrings, it's your sciatic nerve. If you have an irritated nerve root in your lumbar spine, that is just going to irritate it more. And while we're here, not every pain in the butt is piriformis syndrome either. It does exist, but it's notoriously overdiagnosed. It's estimated that in reality, it's the cause of pain in anywhere from 0.3% to 6% of cases. For most people with true sciatica, the more likely driver is a compressed nerve in the lumbar spine. So if the typical figure of 4 stretch you see some people do gives you temporary relief, then great, go ahead. But aggressive manipulations, massage and endless stretching shouldn't be the main focus for most people with sciatica. Hopefully you've managed to get some immediate relief with some of the techniques I've showed you, but even if these have significantly reduced your pain, this is only phase 1. If you now go back to moving in the same way, sitting the same way, bending the same way and repeatedly stressing the same tissues, it's only a matter of time before your sciatica flares up again. The real long-term answer isn't just symptom relief. It's learning how to stop causing the problem in the first place. And that's what I'll cover in the next video. How to get long-term relief from sciatica by addressing the root cause. So if you want to understand how to stop these flare-ups from coming back, I'll see you in this video here.